Welcome to Manor Hill Productions Live. Thanks for logging in. We hope we have some good information to share with you. We appreciate your participation in this webcast. This week, the Manor Hill Industry Spotlight recognizes one of the customers Manor Hill is proud to provide support to for their live events, Advanced Micro Devices. You know them as AMD. Last month, AMD established a COVID-19 high-performance computing fund to provide medical research institutions with computing resources with the goal of accelerating medical research on COVID-19 and other diseases. The fund included an initial donation of $15 million worth of high-performance AMD-powered systems to key medical research institutions. So we definitely appreciate that generous contribution, and I'm sure it will go a long way toward advancing what we know about treating and preventing this disease. In a related story, President Trump invited AMD CEO Lisa Su to be part of his Opening the Country Council of Business Leaders. We're excited about Lisa Su's participation in that council, and we know she'll provide valuable consultation in those decisions as the plan to get America back to work continues to take shape. So thanks, Lisa Su. Thanks, AMD. So let's get back to our presentation. As you watch the live stream today, note the comment bubble in the upper left-hand corner of the window, and please use it anytime during the webcast to submit feedback and questions, and we'll try to get to as many of your questions at the end of the presentation as we can. So today we're proud to welcome back to Manor Hill Productions Live, Hollis Johnson, who is a meeting professional and has a lot of great insight. If you saw part one of, what is it called again, Hollis?
Our program is about to begin.
Our program is about to begin. So if you saw part one of that, you learned a lot about getting ready for the show, a live event, general sessions in particular. Today on part two, Hollis will drill down into some of the nitty-gritty of what really needs to happen on site to make sure the show is successful and your client hires you back again next year. So Hollis, let's pick up where we left off, part two. The webcast is yours.
Thank you. All right, welcome back everybody, and welcome anybody who is tuning in for the first time. So we ended last week identifying the possible components of a general session and the media that you're most likely to get for your speaker support. Once again, content management is one of the biggest jobs for the general sessions. Most of the conferences I do have a minimum of 3 general sessions with anywhere from 3 to 7 presenters for each session, plus panel discussions, award ceremonies, keynote speakers, and sometimes entertainment. That's a lot of content that has to meet deadlines and get to the right place on site. So providing information about format to the people involved in creating this content is a big part of the management phase. Let's begin with scripts. General sessions aren't always scripted, so the first question is your entire session scripted, or are individual presenters scripted? Who's writing the scripts? What's included in a script? If any scripts are used at all, it's a good idea to have a chat with the writer to discuss how you need to receive it. Chances are there will be one writer for each scripted presenter, so that means a few chats. If you do this up front, it's going to save you a lot of time at the end of the process. On your screen right now is an example of a script created in Word. This format is easy to read and edit, and on site, it's easy for the teleprompter operator to convert if prompter is used. Scripts should include not only what is being said, but also any stage direction and media cues, such as slide advances, music, video cues. And a quick note here about slide cues in a script, which are really important. More often than not, an individual presentation will be inserted into a master slide deck for the session. So putting slide numbers in doesn't work real well because those numbers are going to change. Slide cues in the script should include the title on the slide, or if there isn't one, a description of what's on the slide rather than the slide number. As you can see here, John Smith title slide. If parts or all of your general session are scripted, the next question is to prompt or not to prompt. If presenters have a script and are not reading it from a piece of paper or note cards at a lectern, a teleprompter is recommended and should be budgeted for at the beginning. This is not the same as people having bullet points in the notes section of their slide deck. Bullet points are meant to be reminders of the subject matter, not script to be read. And in that case, a prompter really isn't needed. And I'm going to talk about this in a minute, but one of the most important things to remember about scripts is version control. This is true of all of the media, but especially with scripts because they tend to be reviewed by more than one person.
I've got 12 presentations called General Session PowerPoint. Does anyone know where they go in the show? They're asking me to play the opening video, but I got 20 videos. None of them are called opening video. Am I supposed to play all 20 minutes of the In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida track for this guy's play on?
All right, so the most common visual support for presenters are slides. And there are important details to communicate to both the presenters and the production team during the management phase of the project. The first is file type. The slides, are they made in PowerPoint, Keynote, Prezi? Is it being prepared on a PC or a Mac? This might seem like a small detail, but Macs and PCs have some font variations. So we need to know that in order to know what platform to run the presentation on in the show. In some cases, you'll provide the presenters with a template for the program, which is great. This gives a very professional, united look to the event. I love that. Even then, however, if you have a keynote presenter coming from the outside of the organization, they're probably going to show up with their slides on their own template. Next is size. These days, most programs use a 16:9 screen ratio, which is similar to your TV screen at home, or really the computer that you're looking at right now. It's wider than it is tall, a rectangle. In the past, PowerPoint defaulted to a 4:3 size, which is more square. If a presenter is working on an old version of PowerPoint, and believe me, some still are, they will need to make sure that the slide size is changed to 16:9. And finally, slide content. Generally, text, photos, video, sometimes audio. Now, where text is concerned, again, the font style and size are the important factors. If a non-standard font is used, the presenter needs to include the font file when they submit their presentation to you. And in terms of readability, as we've all seen in the past, too much text on a slide is unreadable to the audience. So they need to pay attention to that. All right, next up, we see more and more videos included in presentations, which is great. So communicating the specifics about how videos need to be submitted is really important. While there are different schools of thought on this, most AV techs I work with agree that freestanding video files played from a laptop running a Playback Pro software are preferable to videos embedded in a presentation. When we play them as a standalone, there's a better chance of successful playback than if a large video file stalls a PowerPoint presentation. In that case, we don't have any control of the file. In either case, find out from the production team the preferred format of the video. That is, how the video is saved by whoever edits it. Most often, it will be in a QuickTime MOV ProRes file. And I know that's a little technical, but that will make sense to whoever's making the video. The size and resolution of the file will depend on your screen size. Most video, like the graphics presentations, are made in a 16:9 or in resolution terms, 1920 by 1080. If you're working with a widescreen format, such as a 3:1 or a 4:1 screen, and you're having custom full screen video made, the production team will give you the specific resolution required. Also to remember, if the screens are LED rather than projection, the frame rate for those screens need to be given to the video editor as well. Frame rate will determine how smoothly the video plays on an LED screen. And a quick word about video sound. There are a few things an audio engineer can do on site, but if the sound quality of your video is poor on the file, it will most likely be poor when we play it back in the session. Speaking of sound, fairly early in the content development stage, decisions really need to be made about how announcements are going to happen, how presenters are introduced. Often we do this with pre-recorded voiceovers, as in, "Ladies and gentlemen, our program is about to begin. Please take your seats." These can be done in a studio with a professional voiceover artist, or we can do this on site, depending on the type of voice you prefer and your budget. Either way, we need to schedule time to do it. So the earlier you can make this decision, the better. Now, onto one of Bill's favorite topics, music. This is one of the elements, this is one of the elements that tends to be left out of the planning process. And yet, it can have a really big impact on your audience. So thinking about it ahead of time is very important. It starts with what's playing from the time the doors to the venue are open. What mood are you trying to set? What is the median age of your audience? Are lyrics acceptable? What dynamic are you after? Do you want to build energy to a crescendo right before the program starts, or bring the energy down because you have a very dynamic opening video? Using these dynamics, we really manipulate the emotional state of the audience to focus their attention where we want it to be. Studies show that people relate most to the music they loved as teenagers, believe it or not. So if the median age of your audience is 50, K-pop is probably not going to get them as emotionally tuned in as Prince or Bruce Springsteen or Pearl Jam. We want to grab their attention as soon as they walk in the door. So these choices can make a big difference. We also use music to fill in the time it takes for the presenter to walk from backstage to their position on stage. This is called play on music or stinger music. In some cases, we use generic stuff, and in other cases, either you or the presenter choose a song they want played. Getting this information early on so that we can get the tracks and edit them is going to save a lot of time and stress on site. An important point to remember here is that songs have many versions. So find out not only the name of the song, but the version. Is it the original, a live version, remix, or a cover by another band? What 20 seconds of that 5-minute song do they want played? Awards music is also another place where we play music to fill the time it takes for winners to get to the stage, and also sometimes just as underscore to the script. It can be formal or more upbeat, depending on the type of atmosphere you want to create. Regardless of what music is played, licensing is needed to play any copyrighted music legally. So do you have ASCAP and or BMI licensing for your event? Most people are shrugging right now. Most venues have a CSEC license, which protects them, but it doesn't cover you. So just check with your legal team to see if you have the licensing. Okay, now that we see all the types of media that are going to be collected for the general session, I hope the value of identifying that content manager has become really clear. Multiple scripts, presentations, videos, music, sometimes even props, such as awards and gifts, have to be organized and handed to the production crew for the show. In the planning stage, deadlines should be set so that 1 week prior to the event, files are due to the content manager. In the case of videos being shot on site, this obviously won't be the case, but all other content should be in. The content manager then forwards the files either via a Dropbox type of site, or if the files are small enough, via email to the stage director as soon after they receive them as possible. The director will then get them to the appropriate crew lead once on site. Once the presenter's rehearsal, which I'll talk about later, is complete and whatever tweaks needed are done, the files are considered final. In the case of any last-minute changes, those should be made with the crew backstage at least 1 hour prior to the time the doors open. No changes after doors. And frankly, I would discourage any last-minute changes at all unless some late-breaking news has changed the content. 9 times out of 10, people don't remember the last-minute changes, even when they're on a slide or in a script. So they say what they rehearsed rather than what got updated at the last minute anyway. Please remember, these are best practices.
Hollis, if I could jump in for a second, I have a thought to share with my experience, and you probably have the same one when it comes to YouTube videos inside. You know, you talked about getting the media and the PowerPoints to the content manager. Content manager should click through all of those PowerPoints, and a lot of times they'll find a YouTube link in it. So make sure the people that you're that are producing your videos know about that. And the best thing for them to do is, as you mentioned, download those videos in advance and then look at them, because a lot of times a speaker wants to put in a motivational video that they found on YouTube, okay, that's fine. But a lot of times that video is 8 minutes long, or really they only intended to use the first 30 seconds of it, but they just put the whole link in. So, you know, as someone who's been part of that stage of it, download the video, look at it, make sure see if you can find a better version of it. A lot of times there's a better version somewhere on YouTube, you know, better resolution. And then what parts do we really want to keep? Can we edit it down to the first minute if we can? Because that just makes the meeting shorter, more watchable.
Right.
That's my contribution.
No, that's great. And also that goes back to when I was talking about what version of the music do they want to use if they've chosen specific music, because very often this is the direction you'll get. I want to play Beautiful Day from U2, and I want it to start at 1 minute and 22 seconds and go till 2 minutes and 14 seconds or something like that. Well, what version of the song are we listening to that at 1 minute and 22 seconds we're going to be where they want us to be? So yeah, those kinds of details, I mean, it's tedious. I'm going to tell everybody, it's tedious to have to ask for those kinds of details. But if you don't ask for them up front, we're dealing with them on site when there's no time to edit. So it is really important. And thank you for that about YouTube videos, because
Yeah.
YouTube videos are constantly an issue.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Let's move on.
Well, and just, I'm sorry. The version of the song is important too, as you said, because a lot of times they'll say, oh, it's the clean version. Well, listen and make sure it is. Right. And then also sometimes the clean version is still not that clean. So anyway, just a thought. I've run into that too many times.
Yeah.
Okay,
too.
Back to your presentation.
Great, thanks. All right, now, to make sure your files get to the right place, being very specific in the naming of them is important, and we're going to get to those details in just a moment. Something to remember, the crew who is handling these files has not been part of your planning process. They may not be familiar with your organization or the people in it. In many cases, they've loaded out a different show the day before they load yours in. So being as clear as possible with the media will help guarantee success. With that in mind, setting a clear naming convention for all of your files, starting with the first version of the file, is going to go a very long way. So here's some good examples. For scripts, especially when they go through multiple people for edits and revisions, version numbers are essential in order to ensure that the latest, greatest script is the one used for the show. For individual presenter scripts, indicating the day of the presentation, the presenter's name, and the version number is sufficient. Putting the name of the presentation isn't really necessary from the production standpoint, although it can be added. It's more important for us as the end user to have the person's name. If your entire session is scripted, the day, session title, and version number works well. Very important here is version control. Every time a change is made to a script, the file name should include a new version number, as well as a clear indication of what in the script has changed. This can be done either by highlighting the changes or by utilizing track changes tool in Word. To submit it, a Word document is fine. Final drafts need to be submitted a couple of days prior to load-in so they can be reviewed, questions asked and answered, and files given to the teleprompter operator. On-stage rehearsals are not the time to make major changes to scripts. This is the time for the presenter to do a final dress rehearsal of their presentation. And be aware that it does take time for a teleprompter operator to take a Word version of a script and format it for prompter. On site, this can take, depending on how long this script is, it can take anywhere from an hour to 2 hours. Sometimes it only takes 20 minutes, but this is where it's really important to highlight the changes, because if only one sentence is changed in the whole script, that'll take 3 minutes for the prompter operator to do, but they need to know what that one sentence is. So handing them a totally new script is not going to do that. So please keep that in mind. All right, moving on. For graphics files, the same things apply. The day, the name, the topic, and the version number. Video files is slightly different. We want the day of the presentation, the last name of the presenter, and then the name of the video. So a note here as well, keeping consistent file names when you're referring to a video in scripts or in PowerPoint presentations is going to go a long way to ensure that the right video is played at the right time. For instance, if the name of the video is how to submit media, be sure that's what it's called in the script and the PowerPoint. I've had instances when internally staff have referred to a video as, for example, the hamburger video. So that's how it goes into the script. But the name of the actual video is Welcome to Charlie's. So the production team is searching for a video named Hamburger and go back to you saying they don't have the video, when actually they do, because they have a video called Welcome to Charlie's. And finally, audio. If presenters have specific play on music, using the same day, presenter name, and song name works well. All of these can just go into an audio folder for play-ons for that day. Walk in and out music just needs to go into a day's audio folder. If there's specific order for the walk-in that it needs to play, or if there's a specific song that you want to play first thing for walkout, just let the stage director know that and they'll communicate that to the audio engineer. Remember, these naming conventions need to be communicated from the beginning to anyone who's preparing files. It's going to make your life, or the life of your content manager, if you're lucky enough to have one, a lot easier in the long run. So as media is being collected, organizing it for easy access and sharing comes next. This is an example of a file structure that works well in keeping files throughout the whole project, and especially if you need to hand a flash drive or a hard drive over to the stage director on site. The main folder with the event name. The session day, you'll have one of these subfolders for each day that you have a general session. And the separate subfolders for audio, graphics, scripts, and video for all the media that day. So here's the process on site if the files haven't been available prior to load-in. You hand the flash drive over to the stage director, who then hands it over to the appropriate crew leads. By organizing your files the way you see them on the screen, makes it very easy for each of the leads to drag their own folder onto their desktop and then hand the drive to the next person. Over the course of the weeks leading up to the event, there's going to be multiple versions of files. However, only the final files should be on any drive handed over. One of the most common time wasters on site has to do with flash drives. They're absolutely invaluable to us as updates and changes are made and presenters' PowerPoints come in late, but please, please, please have a separate flash drive that has only the file or files you need to hand over to the stage director. I can't tell you how many precious minutes are spent trying to find the one file needed when the flash drive has the last 7 events on it. Downloading, preparing, and reviewing the files prior to the client review takes time, 3 to 4 hours, depending on how much and what type of media has been submitted and how organized the files are when we receive them. So the process is the files are loaded onto at least 2 computers, a main and backup for both graphics and video. And large video files can take hours, not minutes, to load, especially if a link has been sent rather than a hard drive being delivered. I highly recommend that once we're on site, you don't use links to deliver media. Media should be delivered on a flash or an external hard drive, and there are 2 reasons for this. First, we never know if we're going to have a high-speed internet line in the room. They're expensive, and they might not be in the budget. So if we're depending on venue Wi-Fi, it's generally not sufficient to download large files. And second is time. Downloading takes a long time, and in most situations, we don't have a lot of time. With large video files, even when we receive them on a hard drive, it can take up to an hour to transfer. Audio files also have to be loaded onto a playback system and put in show order, which also takes time. Once everything is loaded and the director and crew have confirmed that everything is running as expected, we're ready for the person or the people from your team to review it with us. This can include individuals from both legal and marketing to check that all the logos, sponsorship, any proprietary information, etc., all of that stuff is correct. It's very important as a last look at what will go on screen during your show. Ideally, we've caught any misspellings or incorrect logos or wacky formatting or anything by now. But sometimes little things have been missed, and this review is the opportunity to fix them. Once all of this is done, we're ready to start rehearsals. Now, this is my friend Ralph, a fellow director who says it perfectly in his Dear World photo. I always think of Ralph when I'm about to talk about rehearsals. So, thank you, Ralph. When it comes to rehearsals, people often think only of the presenter, when in fact rehearsal is for the whole production team, for your project manager so they can make sure everything is going as planned, for the crew so that we know what the presenter is going to do and make sure all of the presentation components are working as planned, and finally for the presenter so they know how to get on and off the stage, where to go, and what to do on stage. Also, if there's anything that the organization might have them do, like introduce the next presenter or make an announcement or have a photo taken before they leave the stage that hasn't been communicated to them ahead of time, this is the time we do it. As a director, I don't really worry too much about how well a presenter knows their presentation. That's really up to them. But I do need to know things like, are they advancing their own slides? Or do they have a cued script so we advance them for them? These details get communicated in the rehearsal process. In terms of scheduling rehearsals, ideally there will be an initial rehearsal at your office if all or at least some of the presenters are located there. This serves two purposes. First, it'll tell you if they've been following the timeline. Remember that? If you remember in the last session when I talked about deadlines and a timeline and a speaker contact person, this is the place the success or failure of that process will come to light. Second, it gives the presenter an opportunity to go through their presentation in front of a small group of people in a relaxed setting so they can get initial feedback and make any major edits there. Even if your presenters are coming from various locations, I would encourage you to have them go through their presentations with their own team at their office before leaving for your event. Now, let's go back a minute to this slide from part 1 of the session last week. These are the key factors that, when well planned, make a big difference now that you're on site and need rehearsal time. Early on, before presenters were identified and invited, these key factors determined how much time you would have between the end of load-in, when the room was ready for media review and rehearsals, and your show time. That's not to say things are going to go perfectly, but your chances of success are far better if you've at least planned this part well. Okay, I'm going to talk about best case scenario or best practices here, and I realize this might not be your reality at the moment. On site, the ideal is to have a speaker rehearsal room where the presenter, the graphics operator, the teleprompter operator, if you're using one, and any staff involved go through the presentation start to finish and make all of the final edits to it. We also find out at this time if they plan to stand at a lectern or walk the stage, what type of microphone they prefer, if they'll advance their own slides, and also if a video shows during their presentation, how they're going to introduce it. All the details the crew needs to know to be ready for them when they rehearse on stage. Then once this rehearsal is done, the finals are considered final. Granted, this isn't always possible to have a speaker rehearsal room, but I'm here to give you these best practices. Sometimes there just isn't the space for the speaker rehearsal room, so all of the rehearsals happen on stage. If it is possible, then the rehearsal on stage can be a dress rehearsal. At a dress rehearsal, we introduce the presenter to the stage manager, and that's the person who gets them from the green room to the stage. We introduce them to the A2 or the audio assist who mics them up, and we'll get a sound check from them. And then we give any direction for their entrance and exit. We run this segment start to finish, from their entrance through their exit, just as it's going to happen during the show. This gives them and us a chance to run their presentation on stage in real time with no audience. How much time an individual rehearsal should be scheduled for, depends on a couple of things. First, how much time you have in the space. Second, how much time does the presenter have in their schedule? And finally, when are other people available? For an office first-time rehearsal, I'd give each presenter twice the amount of time their presentation is scheduled for, at least. And the same is true for a speaker rehearsal room. The presentation should be in better shape by then, but this allows them to go through it a couple times. And then for an on-stage rehearsal, I suggest whatever they've been allotted for their presentation time, plus 10 to 20 minutes to get through all the things I just talked about. Finally, who should rehearse when? Now, if I could rule the world, rehearsals would be scheduled in show order. This is really the best way to ensure for a very, very smooth execution. Mistakes are really made during somebody's presentation. They're made in the transitions between segments, how we get from speaker A's exit to speaker B's entrance. When segments are rehearsed out of order, neither the crew nor the presenter ever get to rehearse things the way they're going to happen in the show. And this brings us once again back to the planning phase. When we're inviting somebody to speak, or in some cases assigning someone to speak, the initial communication should include the day and date of the presentation, but also the expectation that their rehearsal will be the day before, with more specific rehearsal information coming further on. But if we're able to do that, and the budget will allow for it, we'll have a better chance that everyone will get rehearsed. And now, show day. We've planned well, managed the process, final media is loaded and ready to go, rehearsals are complete, and everyone is ready to make this happen. The list on screen is typical schedule for show day, arrival through the end of the session, and varies according to time. Crew call time is generally 1.5 to 2 hours prior to doors, which allows us to check that all the equipment is running and everything is show ready. If the session starts really early in the morning, there's less time for rehearsal, so we try to get those out of the way the day before. The exception to this is when a speaker can't arrive the day before or when dealing with a keynote speaker. They usually don't arrive until the night before they present, so we generally do not see a keynoter until the morning. It's not ideal, but it does happen. Then a cue to cue, which is what we call stepping through everything that happens in the show. For the director and the crew, it gets everybody focused, and if rehearsals have gone out of sequence, it's another chance for us to rehearse all of those transitions I just talked about. Doors. This seems like such a simple concept, yet it can be really confusing on site. This is why way back at the beginning of this presentation, once again, I outlined the importance of having someone from your organization dedicated to the room, either the project manager or the room coordinator. That person and the stage director will stay in communication so that everybody is ready for doors to open and presenters are mic'd up and backstage, if you have one. We run the session from start to finish, and at the end of the program, lights come up, walkout music begins, and we get ready for the next day's rehearsals. Now, some things to remember. This event is live. Sounds obvious, but people sometimes forget that. And the fact is, live events rarely, if ever, go perfectly, although all of us strive for that. Think about some of the things you've seen on the Oscars or during the Super Bowl halftime show or your favorite talk show or weather reports, which are really famous for things. Unexpected things happen. We're human, and humans make mistakes. We're using technology, and sometimes it fails no matter how high quality it is. Try to remember that all of us are professionals with reputations we want to keep positive, and that includes the people backstage making the magic happen. We all want to have the best event possible, and we'll do whatever it takes to make that happen. So if there's questions throughout the process, please ask, and we'll do the same. And finally, give feedback. You know the saying, insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. So if any phase of the process, the planning, the managing, or the execution didn't go as expected, let's discuss what needs to happen differently next time. So to sum it all up, we start with a purpose. Why are we doing this? And what do we want it to look like? We establish a team and we give them specific roles and responsibilities. We create a realistic timeline working back from the event date. We identify those things that are absolute, like the event date, the venue specs, the dates and times of availability, and we're realistic about what we can accomplish with the time available. We keep communication ongoing with the team. Manage the time, the budget, the people, the media, and keep the deadlines set in your timeline. We use consistent file naming conventions for all of the media, and remember to include version numbers. On site, we remember to use dedicated flash drives to hand any media over to the director. We schedule enough rehearsal time. We're sure all the pertinent people are in the media review. And in the end, we have a great show. So that's it. Bill, any questions?
Yeah, actually, we have gotten some questions in. We have time for about 3, depending on how short the answers are. Okay, so this is a good one. If you're short on time, why can't the crew do their technical cue to cue rehearsal that you mentioned just during the regular rehearsal of all the speakers?
Well, if you can think of it like a conductor with an orchestra. So all the musicians have their own parts and they all know their own parts, but it isn't until the conductor gets in front of them and conducts them that they know when to play what. So it's the same thing in this situation. If we haven't had a chance to go through it so they understand the transition, let's say between a PowerPoint slide being up on the screen and a video playing, and then the transition out of the video into the PowerPoint, then that's going to be very rough during rehearsal. And what we want for the presenter on the stage is for them to get a feel of how their presentation is really going to go on stage in real time during the event. So having that opportunity to go through all of those cues with the crew just means that once a presenter is on the stage, it's going to be a much smoother process.
Right. Yeah, and there's the other thing to think about is during the cue to cue, you're just kind of clicking through each video, each PowerPoint, whatever, and then you're clicking through and you roll it, and you roll a video, you go, oh wait, that's the wrong version, or gosh, the sound is kind of low, or oh, there's a built-in transition that wasn't supposed to happen. So if you discover those things in advance and you're not fumbling through those things when the CEO or the presenters are on stage, right, they have a peace of mind. Otherwise, they're going, gee, this looks kind of like this is falling apart. Is this going to happen on stage? And it won't if you figure it out in advance. So it gives them peace of mind too.
Right, and this is a good point. This is usually where I talk about what is happening in this room is really theater. It's business theater. And there isn't a production out there, unless you go to an improv house, that hasn't been rehearsed so that everybody involved, the lighting people, the audio people, the stage hands who are moving furniture on and off, whoever is involved in a theatrical production, they've all rehearsed so that when it comes to showtime, what's supposed to happen actually does happen. So if I can get people to start thinking about this in terms of business theater, we've got an audience, we've got a stage, lights, sound, video, presentations, then the importance of rehearsal becomes very clear.
Okay, next question. Someone asks, what about Spotify? So I assume that means for walk-in and walk-out music.
Right, and more clients are using this, and it helps us out a lot. If you can come up with a Spotify playlist of the music that you want played during walk-in and walk-out, and then you share that playlist with our audio engineer, and he can just play the playlist rather than having to search for songs and download them and do all that part of it. So yeah, Spotify is a really great tool for walk in and walk out. Yeah,
true. Okay, be sure to, okay, this isn't a question, this is, be sure to mention track changes. Yeah, that's talking about scripts, and yeah, turn that on if you remember, because people won't track changes. I have some thoughts on this. Everybody does. Hollis, the importance of tracking changes. You did touch on that, about tracking changes and not just giving somebody a whole new script.
Right. And I think that, and somebody might be able to correct me on this, but I think that depending on what version of Microsoft Word you might be using, if you're using, I think the 365, the Office 365 now, you have the option to highlight the changes in a color rather than just underlining them and then having a note off onto the side, which can get really confusing after a while because so many edits have been made. That is not an option if you have your own old version like I do of Microsoft Word. I can't highlight it any longer. But yes, throughout the process, having your track changes on for edits, And then somebody needs to do a final review of the final script after all the edits have been made, and then submit that without all the track changes on it as your final. Now, there's no such thing as final. And this is a good point to say. None of your files should be named final because it's meaningless, basically. There's always going to be changes. So just stick to version control or version numbers rather. So that once on site, as I said earlier, if there's one sentence out of a whole script that gets changed, giving a prompter operator or even me as the show director, if I'm calling a show off of a script, a whole new script without an indication of what has changed on it adds a lot of time that we don't have on site. So yes, version controls, also having your track changes on, or if there's just really simple edits, just go in there and highlight it in yellow or whatever color you want, and that way we know what has changed.
Yeah, because sometimes you'll get a Word document file that's got a lot of changes in it, and they go, well, why don't you just replace the one you have with this one? Just, you know, that doesn't work because the old one, the previous one, it's formatted, it's got a lot of cues in it. I think honestly, the best script changes that I get to give to the prompter is the CEO has gone through on the airplane and just handwritten changes, cross things out. Actually, that works pretty good. That's really old school, but that's great. You know exactly where, as long as you can read his or her writing, handwriting. But that's handwritten changes are great. As long as we just need to know where the changes are.
Right, right. And you know, the last minute stuff on site, definitely just go back to with the teleprompter operator. You don't even have to provide us with a copy of the script. Just go back there with the teleprompter operator, sit with him or her, and make those changes on the show script. That's really the best way to ensure that you're going to get the final on there.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we're out of time. We got to go. But Hollis, thanks. This has been great. Hope you'll come back and join us again. And thanks to everyone who logged in for the webcast today. So please go to manorhill.com. That's manor-hill.com for notices about upcoming episodes, past recorded archived webinars that you can watch that we've recorded, and also just to learn about the world of Manor Hill Productions Live and all the services offered there. So Hollis, thanks again. Thanks everyone for logging in, and we'll see you next time on Manor Hill Productions Live. Bye, Hollis.
Bye.